hakuna matata.
narudi na kizi,
Hakuna matata.
tukajifute vumbi,
Hakuna matata.
mambo yamepauka,
Hakuna matata.
kifika moja moja,
Hakuna matata.
moja moja ya baridi,
Hakuna matata.
nyama ya kupenda,
Hakuna matata.
nazo familia,
Hakuna matata.
jambo
Oh, jambo bwana, habari gani? Nzuri sana. Wageni wakaribishwa Kilimanjaro, hakuna matata.
Yeah, Jambo. That means hello in Swahili, and this video was taken right at the end of my journey up and down Mount Kilimanjaro a couple of weeks ago. And at the end of that song, I don't know if you noticed, the last line of that is Kilimanjaro Hakuna Matata. Okay, if you watch The Lion King, you basically know my story. Okay, Hakuna Matata means what? No worries. Kilimanjaro, no problem. Kilimanjaro, you got this. Kilimanjaro, yeah, everything's going to be great. And so I had this trip This was 2.5 years in the making. When World Vision first came to me 2.5 years ago and challenged me to climb Kilimanjaro for child sponsorships, it just took a while to get all of our schedules lined up together. And so this actually started last fall. Many of you were a part of the Chosen Challenge at Grace Fellowship back in November, where you sponsored 122 children and are providing clean water in an area called Kalapada, and we are still doing that. We're still challenging you to sponsor children in that area, but it all culminated in this Kilimanjaro challenge that I took a couple of weeks ago. This is the group that I traveled with. There were 11 of us, 10 pastors and 1 civil engineer. This is at O'Hare Airport before we launch out into the trip, and we are all doing that to climb this. This is Kilimanjaro. It never left us. It was there every day of the trip. Kili in Swahili means hill, so it's just a hill. Hakuna Matata. It's a 9,341 foot above the sea level hill. Just to give you some perspective, if you've been to the Colorado Rockies, there are several peaks above 14,000 feet. The highest point in America is Mount Whitney at 14,500 feet. So Kilimanjaro is 33% higher than the highest point in America is the Dome of Africa. It is the tallest freestanding mountain in the world. 20% of those who attempt this climb don't make it. Fortunately, I was able to make it and tell the story. I lived through it. 80% of those who do make it experience some form of physical illness or sickness, which I'll tell you about in just a moment. Here's the deal, friends. I realize, you have those family members or your friends who come back from their 2-week vacation in the Badlands, and they have 300 pictures that you must see. So I understand what this might be like for you, but you were a part of this trip. You signed that flag. You prayed for me. Many of you committed to pray for me. Some of you were committed to talking me out of it, but you were all a part of this project. And so I wanted to share my story with you and then encourage you on our journey to sponsor children and provide clean water in those places that don't have it. Climbing Kilimanjaro, the altitude made sunburn and dehydration a constant concern. We were constantly drinking water even though we didn't think we needed it. And pace, the speed at which we climbed this mountain was so very important, because if you went too fast, and a lot of athletic people are part of that 20% that don't make it because they go too fast. Your body doesn't have time to acclimate to the altitude. And so pole pole in Swahili means slowly, slowly. And so we took this 6-day trip. It took 5 days to get to the top and 1 day down. And we started at this gate called Rongai Gate. There are 7 entrances into Kilimanjaro National Park. It is illegal for anyone to climb this mountain unassisted because of the danger of it and for various reasons. Here I am at the first sign, Rongai Gates. I have a cover on because it's raining. It called for rain all week, but Sunday afternoon was the only time that it rained on us for just a couple of hours, and so we were very fortunate with that. Here we are at that gate, getting our materials together, getting our backpacks on, getting ready for the climb. Notice all the individual packs on the ground. This is our support group. We had 3 professional guides with us, a medical assistant, and then about 20 porters who divvied up all of that equipment and carried we had a duffel bag that could weigh no more than 26 pounds, which they carried, and then all of our sleeping supplies and our food and all the things that needed, so everything that you took up, you must bring down from the mountain, and they were tasked with making sure that we had everything that we needed for that trip. This is my personal assistant named Moshe. He carried my bag. He set up my tent. He made sure that I was okay. When I got down from the climb, he actually untied my shoes and took them off for me. He deserved the sunglasses, but they were mine, and so I traded him with Snicker bars so that he would give those sunglasses back because I actually needed them. Okay. So our first afternoon, Sunday, about a 4-hour trip. There are 5 climate zones from the bottom to the top of Kilimanjaro, and this was the second one, the rainforest. Over the tree, you're hearing all kinds of weird birds, and you're seeing monkeys swinging from trees, all kinds of cool jungle stuff. And then we get to the first camp, which is called Simba Camp. What does the word Simba mean? You've watched Lion King. What is Simba? Lion, okay? This is the lion camp because there are lions in the camp. We didn't see any, but that's why it's called Simba Camp. This is our first night setting up our camp. This is our mess tent where we ate all of our meals. And this is what we woke up to. Kilimanjaro was always there. That was our goal. And so every day we would hike for about 7 or 8 hours onto our next destination. So there we are, going into what we call the moorland, where the rainforest turns into more of brush and tall bushes. We ate lunch in a cave. There were several caves along the way, which was kind of cool. And then we made our way to Kilimanjaro Camp, which is at an elevation of about 12,000 feet. So on the second day, we get up to about the, kind of the general height of the Colorado Rockies. It's very cold. The sun is out, but it's windy and cold. This was our sunset at Kilimanjaro, and this was our sunrise. Again, Kilimanjaro was always there, daring us to come, and so we continued on. Our next destination was Mwenza. There are 3 volcanic cones on Kilimanjaro, Mwenza, Shira, and Kibo. Mwenza is the most spectacular at 16,000 feet, and we are making our way to the bottom of that mountain for our next encampment. Let me back up for just a second. This is where the hike gets really steep and really rocky, where you're really having to watch your footing. These are our porters making their way past us. I'll explain this in just a second as you see this.
Good job. Good job.
There's Mosa
Sante Sana.
carrying my stuff. Thank you, Mosa.
Sante Sana, brother. Wow.
Okay, so every morning, this is how this would go. Every morning, we would pack up. We would have a prayer circle, make our announcements, sing a song, pray together, and then move out while the porters stayed behind, packing up all the tents and all the equipment and that sort of stuff. Midway throughout the morning, they would always pass us. They were always going faster than us. They would always pass us and get to the next camp and set everything up for us so that everything would be ready once we got there. And they would do it singing. They were the most amazing human beings who were carrying 3 times the weight that we were carrying on their head, singing songs as they went, and it just kind of showed me what a soft American I really am. So we make our way to Mwenzi. This is the sign welcoming us to our camp. This is our camp underneath the mountain. That's my tent. Those tall tents are our restrooms, quite chic. On the ridge of Mwenzi, looking back, you could see our camp from the night before, and looking ahead, you could see our goal for the next day. Again, Kili was always in front of us, bidding us forward. Now we're going into the alpine desert, where there's virtually no vegetation and just volcanic rock, and scree, which is loose volcanic rock. This is me. This is the back of me. Someone else took that picture, and I'm just showing that to prove to you that I did not copy and paste out of Pinterest. that I actually did this. At times, the clouds were bidding us forward. At other times, it seemed like the clouds were pushing us forward. Sometimes the clouds would just engulf us in that until we got to Kibo Hut, which is the base camp below the summit. This is David and Sean, two members of our group. The tent right below that sign is the tent that I stayed in, and it started to rain that afternoon, and so I just took the picture from my tent. Again, soft American. So this picture was taken the next day after on our way down from the mountain, but this picture kind of gives you an idea of the ascent, the incline that we were in for on that last climb. The scree, the loose volcanic rock, and then the boulders that you're just literally climbing over or climbing around for 9 hours. Let me back up for just a second. So let me explain to you how this went. 6 o'clock Wednesday morning, we wake up from Mwenzi, and we hike 7 hours through the alpine desert to Kibo Hut. We unpacked, we had lunch, we rested for a couple of hours, and then at 11 o'clock that night, we started our ascent up the summit to the top of Kilimanjaro, 19,000 feet. And so we've not slept. But you need to start at night for a couple of reasons. One, the ground is more frozen, which makes your climb a little bit safer because it's not as slippery. Plus, you get up there by daylight, and you can have enough time to have daylight to come back down to the bottom of the mountain. We started at 11 o'clock at night. We hiked for about 6 hours in complete darkness, and it started to get light. And this reminded me, when I turned around, reminded me that God was still with us. His mercies are new every morning. This is our sunrise over Mwenzi, with where the snow is our base camp, Kibo Hut, and I'm about 3/4 of the way up the mountain at that point. 3 hours later, you like the hat? Okay, this is two of our guides helping me lift the flag that you signed at the top of Kilimanjaro. I just have a couple of pictures of the crater behind us. Okay. And then I want to stop for just a couple of moments and tell you the story about Charles. It didn't take very long. Charles was one of our professional guides. It didn't take very long to figure out that he was a Jesus follower. There were a lot of Muslims, about half Muslim, half Christian. And Charles, after we had our prayer service, our singing, our prayer time in the mornings, he would always start a song in Swahili, and the porters that were Christians would join him in that song, and then he would have a prayer for all of us, and then we would break camp. We didn't ask him to do that. That was just something that he did. And so here's my story, friends. The night before, 24 hours before the summit hike, I got sick. There were 3 people in the group that got sick. We were constantly being tested for our oxygen levels and our pulse rate so that we were strong enough to make the climb. Wednesday night, both times my numbers were low, but not low enough to make me stop. They did have the authority to say, you are not physically capable of making this climb, and we will not let you do this. I never got to that point, but I did have, and all of you have been there, where you feel like you think that you have eliminated every possible thing out of your body, only for your body to tell you, nope, there's more. Okay, so I don't want to be graphic, but friends, I wish I could tell you that this was a breeze, that climbing Kilimanjaro was all fun and games, and that I would do it again in a second. That's just simply not my story. I was sick for 24 hours before I even started. I was dehydrated, I was exhausted, and I was physically ill. And the thoughts of making this climb were very ominous to me at this point. Now. It was very cold. It was very windy. I had 4 layers of clothing on my legs. The upper layer was a pair of ski pants with suspenders. I had 5 layers of clothing on my upper body with my suspenders over the first layer of my T-shirt. An hour into the hike, about midnight, my body said, "Nope, I got more." And so I'm having to literally, I had to pull off the trail. It's all rock, it's dark, it's cold, and I didn't know if I was trembling because I was sick or because I was freezing. But all I knew was if I didn't get these clothes off in a timely manner, everything was going to be very unpleasant. Okay, I don't want to get crap, but this is, and Charles stayed behind, made sure I was okay. He literally redressed me because my hands were shaking too much to even button my coat or to zip up my jackets, my multiple jackets. He pulls Imodium AD out of his backpack, hands them to me, make sure that I'm drinking enough water. He pulls batteries out of his backpack and replaces my batteries in my headlamp. He's buttoning me up and making sure my head is on, and then he just steps back and he waits for me. Because I can choose to go further or I can choose to turn back. He can't walk with me. But if I'm willing to walk, he's going to walk. He can't walk for me, but he will walk with me. And so I gather myself, and then I hike out, okay? About an hour and a half later, it happens again. Now, at this 3 hours into the hike, I'm still closer to base camp than I am to the summit. And I'll tell you that the temptation was real. But there was something in my mind saying, I can't not do this. I can't not do this. For one, I made a promise to you that if I could climb a mountain, you could sponsor a child. So how could I not do this? I mean, at some point, I was, and I know this was pride and maybe even foolishness, but I remember saying to God, I would rather die on this mountain than go home not having climbed it. Because, and God, if you called me to this, then you're going to have to deal with this, okay? So here's the deal. I memorized Psalm 34. In addition to, I memorized Psalm 34 for this trip. I will exalt the Lord at all times. His praise will continually be in my mouth. There are many good verses in that psalm. Psalm 8, oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed are those who take refuge in him. Verse 18, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. And so multiple times every day as we're hiking 7 to 8 hours uphill, I'm reciting this psalm to myself, encouraging me, putting me in the proper perspective, leaning on the Lord. Whenever the group wasn't talking or conversing together, I was reciting Psalm 34 to myself. I would recite it at night, in the morning, and as I was traveling. And so the second time that this physical episode happened, and I'm not sure what's going to happen, I start reciting Psalm 34 to myself, and I get to verse 10, and I can't go further. Verse 10 says, "Those who seek the Lord lack no good thing." Those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Would you say that with me? Those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. And I'm thinking to God, saying to God, at this point, why are we doing this? People can sponsor children without me climbing this mountain. Why am I doing this? And then this verse just keeps coming back to me. Those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. I don't know how I'm going to do this, God, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. I don't know what mountain you're putting. I don't know why you're putting this in my way, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Just because God calls you to something doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Just because God calls you to something. In fact, if God is calling you to something, If it is easy, you might want to check if that's God calling you. And so through this whole episode, this whole experience, I'm reciting this verse to me. Those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. And so, friends, one of my strongholds is fear. You know, fear of failure, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, just fear of the future. And so, fear is grabbing hold of me, and I'm combating that with those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. And so I'm making my way through this second episode, and Charles is just standing there waiting. He's doing whatever he can to help me. He's redressing me, and then he just stands back. I will walk with you, but I cannot walk for you. And so you called me to this mountain, so I don't care how long it takes. I don't care how slow I have to go. I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other until I make it to the top. And so this picture is taken of Charles on Saturday after all of this is over. Our guides met us for lunch to debrief the trip on Saturday afternoon, and the very first thing he does when he sits down is that he opens up his Bible and he just shares with us what he had read that morning and what God was saying to him. And I was too far away from him to actually hear what he was saying, but I was able to get this shot of a man that I will probably never see again this side of heaven, but a man who God used to fulfill a calling in my life. And so when I get to heaven, I'll be able to say to him, "Hey, Charles, remember me? I'm the one," and he'll say, "We don't have to talk about that." This is me at the end. If you're Facebook friends with me, you will have seen this picture. 49 miles of hiking from 8,000 feet to 19,000 feet, back to 8,000 feet, 6 days. It was awesome. It was intimidating. It was enjoyable. It was horrible. It was challenging. It stretched every part of my being, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. But God is, what did I learn from this experience? I learned a lot about my body, what my body can do, what my body can't do, what my body likes, what it doesn't like. I learned that you can live without a lot of stuff and be just fine. We soft Americans, you can live without a lot of stuff and make it. I learned that privacy is overrated. And I learned that humility is indispensable. I'm not a person that likes to ask for help. But God, we were constantly sharing things with each other, helping each other out. I don't have that. Well, I have it. You can borrow this, or I have this. Anybody need this? And sunscreen and medication and clothing and all kinds of stuff. I never talked so much about bodily functions with a group of strangers ever in my entire life. But that's what we learn. When you do life together, you get personal, and you have to. In order to survive, you have to do this together. And so I learned that I'm not that important. Standing on the tallest mountain in the world, looking up at probably the brightest moon that I ever see in my life, and then I'm thinking, what is man that you are mindful of him? And yet you've blessed him with so much and called him to so much. I've learned that if I'm not dead, I'm not done. So regardless of what peak God calls you to, you summit that peak. And guess what, friends? He has another peak for you. One of the things going on to Mwenzi, that was our hike. It was one peak to the next, one peak, down, up, down, up, down, up. Every time we got to one peak, we thought, okay, we're here, only for another peak to reveal itself to us. Friends, you have no idea what God is calling you to. Just climb the peak, and He will have another peak for you. And if you're not quite in the peak, and if you're in the valley, friends, you can't be in a valley without a peak. So if you're in the valley, know that there's a peak for you, and He's just calling you to climb. I learned that whatever God is calling you to, it will not be easy, it will not be quick, and many times it will not be fun. So anyway, that's my climb. Just one extra credit story to tell you before, and I have to tell this story. I tried to get my picture taken, or I tried to take a picture with every camp that we stayed at. This is Harumbo Hut, the last one before we exited the park. So I got up to get my picture taken with a friend, and then this guy jumps up on the platform and photobombs my picture. I don't know who he is, and I don't know where he's from. He spoke broken English. But you'll notice there's some women below the sign watching all of this happen. See them? The woman in the fuchsia sweatshirt or coat or whatever. Here's what happened. I got my picture taken. I came down from the platform. All of these people get up. About 14 people get up to get their picture taken. And the woman in the fuchsia jacket waves me in. Come get your picture taken. Come, picture with us. Picture with us. And so I photobomb their picture. We all get down. We start. One of the fascinating things about the whole trip is meeting people from all over the world, Australia, Austria, Canada, China. Just all people from all over the world traveling, climbing this mountain. And so I said, "Where are you from?" And they said, "Iran, Iran, Iran." You're from Iran? She says, "Yes. Where are you from?" I'm not sure I want to tell you. I said, I'm from America. I'm from America. And this woman in the fuchsia jacket, her immediate response to me was that she threw her arms around me like we were long-lost relatives. The first thing that comes out of her mouth is, "Our government is bad, but our people are very good." And I put my arms around her, and I said, "We know that. America knows that." And then she kind of slaps her hand on my chest. She goes, "You must come to Iran. You must come to Iran." And I said, "I'm not sure I'm allowed to do that, but I will certainly pray for you. I will certainly pray for you." And that's just one of the stories out of many that and that was just the first week. That's just the first week. The second week was spent with World Vision. This is the headquarters in Nairobi where we got to celebrate one of their chapel services on Monday. And then we spent the rest of the week in an area, well, let me talk about their vision, World Vision's mission. Our vision for every child, life in all its fullness, our prayer for every heart, the will to make it so. And you are a part of that. You're fulfilling their mission by providing clean water and sponsoring children. We spent the rest of the week in an area called Mutomo, where World Vision has the largest water project they've ever constructed in this area called Mutomo. This is the Athi River from where they get their water. Beautiful stream, isn't it? This is the intake station that takes the water from the river and then pumps it up to the sediment station where it sits a while and has all of the sediments filtering to the bottom, and then it gets pumped up to the highest peak in Kuiti County where it is filtered and cleaned and put in one of the tanks that you see on the left. There it is. There's the filtering plant. And then from that point, it is gravity fed down to dozens and dozens and dozens of water kiosks. This is one of them. You can see some of the villagers and some of the livestock coming around that kiosk to get fresh, clean water. Here we go. Sorry.
Not for the family. For the family. Not for the family.
This is just a clip of a group of school children at lunchtime with their own small jerry cans to get water for the rest of the afternoon. And so all of the livestock, there's a woman just beating the daylights out of a cow, trying to get this cow out of the way. Donkeys are braying and goats are singing, and it's just fascinating. You'll see the larger jerry cans that look similar to this. And let me explain this to you. Every water kiosk that provides clean water to the villagers, they are required to buy their own jerry can at a cost of about 50 cents for the can, and then they're required to pay like 2 cents a month for all the fresh water that their jerry cans can hold. This happens for two reasons. Number one, that 2 cents a month helps to maintain the kiosk to keep it clean and keep it functioning. And number two, it gives the villagers ownership of that kiosk. because World Vision's main objective is to create self-sustaining communities and to enable them to do that. And so they're all required to support the kiosk in that way. This is a reservoir that was built many years ago before the kiosks were installed. People are still getting their water from this reservoir. Looks great, doesn't it? You can see the red clay that mixes in with the water. Procter & Gamble partnered with World Vision several years ago to provide water purifying packets to those who are still getting their water from those types of sources. And so here's, see the water on the left? That's the water that they would normally bring home. That's the water that they would normally drink. Okay, so with the water purifying tablets, they empty that packet into the water. They stir it for 5 minutes, and then they let it set for 5 minutes. And you can see the sediment starting to separate from the water. Can you see that? And then about 5 minutes later, most of that stuff has filtered down to the bottom. Now, let me ask you a show of hands. How many of you would drink this water? Okay, we wouldn't drink this water because it still doesn't look clean enough. The problem they were having with the villagers is that they wouldn't drink this water because it was too clean. They had never seen water that clear, and so they didn't trust the process. Isn't that a spiritual lesson for us? How many times do we stay entrenched in our own belief systems, in our own systems, and we're not willing to trust the freedom that God has for us? And so you would take that water and in the last filtering step, through that filter into the next container to where it is clean, and you can't see it really well, but he's drinking that water that came through that second. This is not a World Vision employee. This is a villager who was trained in that process, and his job is now to go to all of the villages and not only help the villagers use this process, because Procter & Gamble was providing these tablets for free, but to convince these villagers that this water was better for them. This was a church where we had lunch. The 5 children sitting on the front row of this group were all sponsored by members of our group. And so that afternoon, they got to have lunch with their sponsored children and their families. This is a table finance meeting where women in the village are learning to pool their money together to create a savings and loan where they save their money and then they loan their money out to each other, building the economy in their community. One woman came to the table finance meeting that we were there, needed to borrow hundreds of shillings. I don't remember how much it was, but it was the equivalent of $14. $14 so she could put her child in school. And she borrowed that money at a 10% interest rate with a month to repay that loan. And they're just learning how to create an economy and support and to build their economy. This is a group of pastors that we met with, worshiped together, prayed for them, talked about the concerns in their community. And this is a school that we visited. You'll notice the rooms with the bunting over the windows. Those are 2 classrooms that World Vision was able to build for them, and we went that day to dedicate those 2 classrooms so that the children could use that. And this is their washroom. World Vision was able to provide a latrine for them to improve their sanitation. But if you'll notice at the very top of the picture, there's a tin can. They don't have soap, so they use ash as a cleansing mechanism. And on the bottom of the picture, you'll see his foot on a board. And so when he would press on the board, it would tip the water jug where his hands are, and to empty out the water so that he could wash his hands and keep their hands clean. And they were being taught how to stay clean and how to improve their sanitation. All because you sponsored a child. There are places in this world who do not have the basic necessities of life, and it all starts with water. It all starts with water. And when you sponsor a child, you are not only creating a one-to-one relationship with that child, World Vision is then able to create a one-to-one relationship with their community. And through your sponsorships, they're able to provide the very basic necessity of life, which is water. And when they have water, they can grow their economy. When they have water, they can have adequate health care. When they have water, their children can go to school instead of going to get water every day. And water begins with child sponsorship. That's what you did last fall. That's what we're going to continue to encourage you to do. If you've not sponsored children before, you can sponsor them. You can sponsor right here in the building. You can pick a child from Kalispell to sponsor, or you can go to our website, worldvision.org/grace. All of those children to be sponsored are from Kalispell. What we saw in Mutomo, they're like two years away from providing clean water to 100,000 people because of their water project. And what they're at the end of completing in Mutomo, they're just beginning in Kalispell, and you have been a part of that through child sponsorships. Every child that's sponsored creates a one-to-one relationship with their sponsor, but also creates a one-to-one relationship with World Vision that is providing water, health care, education. And here's the deal, friends. Pastors can't stay in villages that can't support them. But when they have economies that are thriving and self-sustaining, then they can support their pastors, they can support their churches, and they can hear the gospel on a regular basis. And that is the ultimate goal, that everyone have a relationship with Jesus. But it's hard to listen. It's hard to hear the gospel when you're hungry and you're thirsty. You don't have a roof over your head or clothes on your back. And so again, I don't know what God is calling you to do. I said a couple of months ago, if I can climb a mountain, maybe you can sponsor a child. Those of you members of Team World Vision, you say, if I can run a marathon, you can sponsor a child. I don't know what mountain is in front of you, but if God is calling you to that, He will see it through. He is faithful to complete the work in you. And so I applaud you for what you've already done, and I challenge you for what you're going to do to change the life of a child, to change the life of a community, all because we were willing to give of ourselves. Would you pray with me? Father, I'm so grateful that you kept me strong enough to fulfill the calling that you placed on my life. And I thank you, Father, for the lessons learned, the lessons that I'm still learning through this experience. But most of all, more than anything, Father, I thank you for what you're doing in the life of Grace Fellowship to change the lives of children on the other side of the world. And Father, I pray that you would instill within us the compassion and the motivation, the heart and the determination to make that happen, to provide clean water, to help sustain an economy where the gospel can be preached and people can come into a relationship with you. That is our goal, Father. That is what you're calling us to do. We ask, Father, that you continue to guide us in that. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.